You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brooke-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And the next way that you can walk this path is by joining us for the new evolution of Waking the Wild Sovereign, which begins in November and is almost full. This is our most intimate crucible. It's currently the only way to work with us one-to-one, and it is the way to free yourself from conditioning and wounding, discover and express your unique gifts, open your heart, and follow your soul path, becoming the sovereign man or woman you came here to be. It's almost full up with the kings and queens who have heeded the call. And if you're feeling it could be for you too, then go along to primalhappiness.co/WTWS to discover more and arrange a call to explore it with one of us. And now on to this week's show. It's with the infinite couple. We are back with Barbara, Richard and Sri Namaste. They're back for the second time because, well, they're two of my favorite guests and people. Barbara and Sri are spiritual leaders and relationship alchemists who created a potent pathway to sacred love, business growth, and spiritual alchemy. They've worked privately with some of the most exciting individuals and couples throughout the globe. The infinite couple embraced the divine feminine and masculine and created ultimate couple archetyping protocols that has resulted in life-changing shifts in radical fulfillment, limitless abundance, and self-actualizations among individuals and couples. And so in today's show, we explored Richard and Namaste's understanding and deep embodiment of union, how bringing together of polarities such as men and women, black and white, spirit and science, light and dark workers, and conscious wealth is the future, and one that is available to us now if we're willing to release our grip on homogeneity and fairness. This is another epic show with them. I'm so looking forward to sharing this with you. Let's dive in. Hello, Richard and Namaste. A huge welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure.
Great to be here.
Oh my goodness, such a pleasure, such a pleasure. And it was one of those conversations we're having before we started recording. I'm like, I wish I was recording this. Which is usually a good sign.
Yeah, it really does.
So we have got, the last time we spoke, we had an incredibly juicy topic. And I think this is actually as juicy. This, as you said, Namaste, it's really another way of looking at and talking about polarity, just not just the polarity of masculine and feminine, but all the other ways polarity can show up and how that can be I guess I was going to say a way to work in union, but it's kind of the way to work together in union. So it's something that's very, very dear to my heart. And then I saw a post of, I think it was yours, Namaste, where you were talking, I think you said something like, it said something about we, basically. That was, and then you named things that you saw on this. So first of all, before I go any further, I would just love for you to, I guess, define what you mean when we're talking about this kind of we and that kind of combining or bringing together of two opposites.
I believe the post said the future is not she, it's we.
That's it. Yes, that's so much more. Catchy than I just said. Thank you.
And I think I believe that what we're speaking to there is that a core truth that I really fully believe in, and I'm speaking, when I say I'm speaking on behalf of both of us. So, but is that everything is polar in nature. We live in a universe of polarity, deliberately and intentionally created. This is where we get our diversity from. This is what we get, where we get creativity from and creation from, right? Is in the nature of these polarities. And so when we start isolating and saying, well, there's only one aspect of the polarity that we are going to consider to be good, then we end up in really, we collapse the field of creativity. So some of the polarities that we were talking about on that post, if I'm recalling correctly, is like, young people and the older generation, different races, brown and pink, okay? Different variations and shades of melanin, right? Indigenous cultures and more technologically advanced and first world cultures working together. Science and spirituality. So it's not an either or, it's a yes and finding the correct and most beneficial ways that we can work together when in each specific circumstance. In other words, not looking for a formula, because it's not a formula.
Yeah, it's not a formula. I think what stands out about the polarity is that when we look at, folks that feel that, there needs to be this homogeneity all over the place. I think that, they're well-intended, but ill-informed. It's like, no, people should not be in groups being mean to another group and things like that. We should not be doing that. But that doesn't mean that we need to be the same across the board and guarantee outcomes where everybody has the same experience and things like that. That's taking it too far. It's conflating it and using using the concept or the idea in an inappropriate fashion, because we benefit, humanity, creation, everything benefits from polarity, from that tension, from that east versus west, north versus south. And it's not a versus in that these the polar opposites, if you will, are at war with each other.
Right. They're not oppositional.
They're not oppositional.
They're complementary.
Complementary. Absolutely.
Yeah. What you've just brought to mind, Richard, is I mentioned before we started recording that I'm currently running a course that I run every year called Wake Well Feminine. And one of the conversations we were in today was around fairness, we could call, I guess, equality, and how that can be distorted to mean, again, this kind of need for homogeneity and sameness. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. It's again, I think, something that's often well intended. Oh, things need to be fair. But again, that often then leads to this kind of, therefore, they need to be the same. Exactly. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on what does that mean to you when people are talking about things like fairness and equality?
Well, having spent over a quarter century in the diversity field, where it's specifically focused on that whole issue of fairness, what looks like fairness to the greatest amount of people. Again, well-intended, like we want everybody to have, the best possible outcome for whatever they're doing, but ill-informed in that, the diversity is actually what contributes to our strength. And there's always a watering down or a lessening in strength when we try to ensure the same outcome for everybody. So in terms of, from a socioeconomic standpoint, it's like there isn't a situation where, we want everybody to get wonderful contracts, because you know what? Only one company can get the contract. And that company that gets the contract needs to be the company that's the best one available at the best available cost. But when you say, well, no, we want this specific company because the people who own the company are brown, then you interject this kind of criteria into the mix that has nothing to do with expertise or their ability or capacity. It's a separate criteria that actually leads to a lesson across the board, where it's like, okay, well, are they the best? We don't know. Are they the most efficient? We don't know. Are they the most cost effective? We don't know. What do we know about them? Well, they're brown, or they're tan, or they're pink, or they come from this part of the country, or they're all women. It's like whenever we interject that third criteria in there, it never, the utility instantly starts to go down instead of up.
Yeah, I believe I'm not a big fan of fairness. Interestingly enough, I'm not. I really like the idea of a meritocracy, and I really love democracy. And I believe that in those circumstances, then what you end up with is some people having more and some people having less. And being people who have experienced what it is to have less and then have more, I'll say that when I had less, I never looked and said, well, someone else should do something about the fact that I have less. Just never even occurred to me that it was someone else's responsibility.
But that they should have less.
Or that they should have less so that I could have more.
Right, yeah.
And, I always felt that it was up to me, and it's something that Baba Richard says pretty frequently, which is that all men are created equal, but what you do after that is up to you. Right. So because of that means that you're going to have a situation where, the type of lifestyle that really lights me up to live is not the type of lifestyle that everyone wants. Should we all have the same kind of lifestyle just because, just to make it fair, as parents, we never did that even with our children. We did things, it wasn't based on arbitrary things like an age or a time, or it's got to be fair for everyone. We did it based upon what their desires were, how they expressed responsibility, what their gifts were. All of our children, we have 8 adult kids, and they don't all have the same gifts. So we looked at what their gifts were, their talents, their abilities, their capacities, and what we could entrust them with, right? And so I think that is the nature of a diverse world, is that you're going to have all of that fluidity. And I think that we try to resolve that complexity with the simplicity of fairness. Like, can we just make it simpler? And I'm like, yeah, but sovereigns don't need fair.
Right.
So I believe that you're sovereign, and so I believe that when you know better, you do better, and you come across and you know how to take the actions on the opportunities that come your way without the need for some sort of a leveling agent, leveling the playing field.
And in truth, you don't want that. You really don't. It's like we are foodies. We love excellent and wonderful dining experiences. But at the same time, parity and fairness would dictate that as you have an executive chef who's brilliant, you must also include people in the kitchen who cannot cook. That would be fair, right? That would be fair, right? Or if we go and watch an NBA game, it's not enough to just be tall and athletic. We need some short, fat people to be out there as well, because that would be fair.
Right.
You really want to watch that game. No, and you don't want to eat at that restaurant either.
Yeah, well, that brings up something else.
You're on fire with the quotes today, by the way.
Well, it brings up that when you start focusing on fairness, what you can end up doing is not focusing on excellence. And I think that excellence and being and mastery should be where we are looking when we are saying, what kind of world do I want to live in? I want to live in a world where excellence and mastery and genius and artistry and beauty is rewarded
and celebrated.
Celebrated,
valued.
Not in a world where we need everything is mundane under the umbrella of fair.
Yes, I love that. It's so much in what you've said that is just, oh my goodness, like music to my ears. It's funny what you said there, Namaste, about, I'm not too bothered about fair or not too interested. And it was actually me saying in the course I'm running something like a sovereign isn't concerned with what's fair, that created the, there's some triggers, got creative with that. And I shared a post I wrote earlier this year, I think it was, talking about if we look at nature, there isn't the concept of fair, there's all sorts of differences. And then even within the same species, two wolves, one will be more beautiful, one will be stronger, one will be more fertile. And so, yeah, I'm completely with you. I think it's often well intended, but it's this desire to make simple, to make it something that we can get our heads around, when it's way more like, the complexity is the beauty, and vice versa. I really hear you on that. What would you, so talking about, we don't have to focus on race particularly, but I guess this is the one that is driving a lot of the conversations about how do we make things more equitable. So looking at what you were saying about, for example, choosing a company to deliver a service, for example. Because of the culture we're in, and because of, I guess, things that have happened in that culture that has created where we are, as in the culture itself, it's hard to say it's not natural, because ultimately it's a product of humans who are natural. So there is that too, which adds a whole other level of complexity. But if, for example, being born, for example, a Black woman versus a white woman in our culture, we don't start in the same place. And so whilst everything you've said is true, there is also the fact there's a kind of aspects that are beneficial for me being white versus that you don't have as a Black woman. So I'd love to hear your sense on that, because whilst I can make sense of other things, for example, I don't know, some of the conversation we're having earlier is some of the women who have young children have much more support than other women that have children, or some women have, I don't know, all sorts of different things. There isn't even, it doesn't matter what you look at, there isn't a level playing field. But with this thing in particular, when we're talking about race, there is like an external, almost like thing that's creating a difference. So I hope the question is clear. I've gone a bit all over the place, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's very clear. And it's so interesting, because we've, Bob Rich and I have talked about this quite a bit because of his history and in diversity and sociology and all of that. And watching our world shift, where there is more divisiveness racially than it seems like we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years, like right now. It's so amazing to me to watch people separating along racial lines the way they are, because, I've never felt, and we didn't raise our children with this belief either, that the melanation in my skin is in any way a liability in my society or in my culture. In other words, I have never looked at to use your phrase, a white woman and thought she has opportunities and things in life that I do not, because I'm brown. What I do believe is that there are divisions along social economic lines, and that frequently people conflate the two things, that they associate a higher social economic status with whiteness, and a lower social economic status, and even a lower educational status, academic status, with brownness. And that's not always true. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not, right? And it would just be unfair to me, using that word fairness again, but unfair in the sense of it just being not true for me to, owning multiple businesses, multiple streams of income, multiple seven-figure entrepreneurs, and to look at a woman who is on, for instance, welfare and say she has more opportunities than I do because she's white. I would have to be delusional to believe that. You understand? And so for me, I think that while that is a a narrative that is being placed forward. And I think a lot of very well-meaning, very compassionate, very white people who are trying to be aware of their own environment and their own privilege, are trying to kind of engage with that. But I think the downside of it is that there isn't a monolith when it comes to being Black. There are Black people who have a significantly different experience than I do. I've never lived in the inner city. I've never lived in the projects. I've never had some of those experiences that a lot of people associate with, this is the Black experience. And I'm like, no, I think that's the experience of poverty. That's the experience of lack. That's not the experience of a specific race. Now, is there differences that tend to happen culturally? In fact, I would say that I probably have more in common, for instance, because I'm a native New Yorker, right? So I probably have more in common with a white person from Long Island, where I'm from, than I would have in common with a brown person from Texas, where I live, but I'm not from. Do you understand? So I think it's more of a we have cultural connections more than anything else. And I think that when a person perceives anything that is innate to their being, whether it be their race, their gender, their height, anything that is innate to their being as a liability, they disempower themselves because that is not something that you can change. Yeah. And so what's the benefit? If I see myself as a brown woman who is, I don't get things because I'm brown, it's literally me placing myself in a space of being disempowered when you have plenty of brown people who have done amazing things and lived in their greatness. And without fail, they did that because they did not see it as a liability. They refused to see it as a limitation.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah.
That's hard to argue with. Say that people, I always say I'm in danger of losing my Black card because a lot of people, feel some kind of way about that. They really feel like they want that division, and I just can't stand for that.
A sense of community about that, and that's one of the things that as humans we do need and we desire, and we tend to gravitate toward. So when you have these pervasive ideas that says that melanated people are by nature, downtrodden and less educated, and this, that, and the third, then, there's a fair amount of dopamine that goes around when those people are, shoulder to shoulder, like, yes, this is our experience. And because the universe is endlessly accommodating, then they tend to have life outcomes that mirror the things that they believe in. But amazingly enough, that's also true for folks that do not see their melanation as a liability as well. So it's like, how can that, because those things are true for those folks that fervently believe that they will be, I can't get a break, it's like, but at the same time, that was like Rodney Dangerfield's whole career. I can't get a break. I don't get any respect. Everything is horrible. And if you believe that, then that is true for you, and nobody can dissuade you from that path that you're on, because your outcomes, you won't get the job. You won't get the outcome. Why? Because you firmly believe that. But if you firmly believe that you will, then amazingly enough, those things happen. And so then we look at those people and say, well, easy for you to say, 7-figure entrepreneur, because you're not living in the real world, because the real world is populated by people who are downtrodden. Well, wait a minute. We're all part of the same world. So my world experience is just as valid as someone else's. And I need not shrink and say, well, because you're having negative outcomes, then I guess yours is the prevailing reality, because it's simply not true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone who forced to allow me to do it, or to be there, or to serve me because I'm brown, or wanted to partner with me because I'm brown. I actually wrote a post about that. Like, if you want me on your podcast, if you want to interview me, if you want me to be a part of your summit or whatever, do it because I'm excellent at what I do. In fact, I would say I'm the best at what I do. But don't do it because I'm brown. Because if you're doing it because I need a brown face, then I'm not your person. Find someone else, because that is not the most brilliant thing about me. That isn't the thing that should cause you to want me to be in your spaces. Do it because you respect me and you appreciate my work, not because, oh, this will keep me from getting canceled.
See? Yeah, there's two of them right there. Two brown people. It must be, by definition, good people.
I'm so pleased right now that wasn't the reason I asked you.
I know, and that's why we're here, because we know that wasn't the reason why, you know, but we do tell people, we're like, hey, so what do you know about us? Why are you interested? because sometimes people they're like, okay, I have to have like one of each, like a little collection.
Yeah.
I need an indigenous person.
Collect them all, right.
I need a brown person. I need to make sure I have a woman, you know, and it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, the list goes on and on.
We can do better.
Yeah. It's not the most interesting thing about any of this.
No.
Yeah, that's so true. So you've mentioned sovereignty a number of times, which is something that is really embedded in our work too. And as you were talking, I was thinking how this is really taking it to places that can get us into trouble now. I was thinking of it through the lens of I don't know if you're familiar with this way of looking at it through kind of like the victim triangle or sovereign. And it's also known as the drama triangle, but particularly like there's an article by a woman called Lynn Forrest, who actually is coming on the show next week, who renamed it the victim triangle, as in whether you're in the victim, persecutor or rescuer, you are in that victim triangle. And I was really, as you were talking, I was like, yes, of course. That way of viewing the world and yourself only can make sense, like the way you're doing it can only make sense from sovereignty, which is then also requires you to look at other people as sovereigns. It's not possible to see other people as victims because you would need to be on the victim triangle yourself. You'd need to be probably a rescuer in order to see someone else as a victim in that way. And I was also thinking how this links back to where we started talking about from that place of sovereignty and seeing other people as sovereigns, there is a real, I think we're naturally then positioned to see people's greatness, to see how they can, you know, bring value, how they can bring mastery. We're not looking at kind of, oh, there's a, you know, deficiency and then therefore they need me to do whatever. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it feels that to me, in order to create that union, you need to be a sovereign looking out at the world and seeing other sovereigns.
Exactly. That is exactly how we feel.
Right. Yeah. Our sovereignty is where that, you know, when you're joining together in union, it's like you're bringing the best of yourself, but you're also your power, but you're also joining together with another powerful person. And then the two of you, because we do need, you know, those human things like support and encouragement and those things like that, you become this engine that can actually accomplish practically anything. Why? Because you have that support and that encouragement, and you can do it, and nothing can stop you, etc., when you need it most. And that, you know, operating like that, and you go through the world like, I decide. I choose what I want to do. I decide how far I want to go. I decide what, you know, at what level is good enough, or whether I want to keep going in a particular field of endeavor to achieve mastery in that, as opposed to looking at arbitrary distinctions that may be imposed upon me, where they won't let me, whoever they happen to be. It's like, no, there's no they. There's only my will and what I want to impose upon the things that are in front of me, the goals and things like that I choose. So it's like, I decide always.
Yeah, we always say that victim, it's so interesting because that's what we call it as well, as a victim triangle, that, you know, everyone gets to take a turn When you are part of that circle, you're going to take a turn in each position. So if you're the victim, at some point you're going to be the villain. We call it victim, villain, and hero. So at some point you're going to be the villain to somebody. And then at some point you're also getting to be the hero, right? You're going to save someone. And all three of those positions is focusing on the wrong aspect of love, which is loved. The victim wants to be loved. Right? So does the villain.
And so does the hero.
And the hero wants to make sure that the victim is loved, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in sovereignty, it is I am love. And so all that I do is loving. And it is loving what? I'm creating a life based on that which I love. I'm always focusing on the giving and the expression of love versus the seeking of being loved by someone else. And so it totally shifts how you enter into relationships, how you engage with your business and with your wealth creation, with your children, with your body. It's like everything in your life just kind of shifts just by the changing of those two, from loved to loving. But really what it is a state of mind change and a state of occupation change, because you're no longer focusing on one of those. You're willing to be sovereign, and you also don't fear other people being sovereign.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Which, going back to what you said, Richard, about the they, and you're like, there is no they. It requires not being sovereign to see, when we say they, we know what we mean. Like, it requires that. Whereas from that, I am love, from sovereignty, that just isn't available to see people as having this kind of power over us or a threat to us.
Yeah, that is so powerful.
It's when we perceive ourselves as not being sovereign, we are surrounded by days of one form or another.
A world of days.
From the cost of cupcakes in your local grocery store to the price of gas, your mortgage rates, everything. We're surrounded by days. And those days are not here to help us. They're here to take from us the little bit that we have. But when we operate in sovereignty, we operate from the premise that there's more than enough for all of us to have more than enough, and there'll be more than enough left over. And also there's opportunity. We're surrounded by opportunity. Why? Because there are no fences. There are no days. I decide what direction I want to go in, and I go in that direction until I want to stop. It's like there's no limitations in that.
Freedom.
Freedom.
Wow. Oh my goodness. This conversation has gone into so many wonderful areas that I wasn't expecting during this. So we're going to be coming up on time shortly. I'd like to put this over to you two now to, I guess, is there something that we've not touched on that you feel is a helpful aspect of this, what we're talking about here, working as we? And it might be particularly going back to your article. I mean, feel free if there's something else, but going back to the post you wrote, Namaste, about the future isn't she, it's we. It might be specifically about that, the way that we're kind of prioritizing what had been seen as minorities, for example, and then saying, okay, so we now need to put the focus there, which again is well-intended, but isn't what we're talking about here. So I'd love to hear either your thoughts on that, or if there's somewhere else you feel extra juicy that we haven't touched on yet.
I think we need each other. We came from, a lot of people say that we've come here to learn. We came to the planet to learn. But my belief is that we actually come from perfection. And so we've come here as an individuation to enjoy and to experience being human, to experience imperfection, because we come from perfection. And so from that place, then we get to have these various types of experiences. And those experiences cause us to lean into each other. And in other words, instead of just being one, we get to have experiences that cause us to be like puzzle pieces fitting together.
Yeah.
And if a person doesn't know how to play, doesn't understand or doesn't enjoy a puzzle, they might think it would be better if we just cut off all the pieces and just made everything square and just laid it out. You know, why do we need puzzles? We don't need puzzles. Puzzles are frustrating, but it's only frustrating if you don't know how to play. If you know how to play and you're willing to play, then it is enjoyable to sit and see how things fit together, even if it isn't immediately apparent. And I think in that future it's a cry from the universe, a clarion call from the universe to remember to play with each other in our diversity. So if I'm talking to you and you are so different from me, like a woman is talking to a man and his style of communication and his facial expressions and everything is so different, and her style of communication and how she moves is so different, then if we're going to play together, then instead of meeting that with judgment, we meet it with curiosity. We meet it with a fundamental belief in the goodness of the other person and the well-meaning of the other person, like children do if they're going to play together. You have to believe that the other person wants to play with you and that they're not trying to do you harm. And I think that fundamentally we have the capacity to move into that we future when we can give each other grace and understanding and listen generously and be deeply curious, ask lots of questions. Like the more triggered and frustrated and the more you're like, you're wrong and I'm right, the more you should slow down and ask more questions. because that's really what it depends on.
Yeah. Interacting as these individuated slices of infinity, we rarely, if ever, want the same thing. You know, and I think that that what leads to conflict is that implicit assumption that you want the opposite of what I want, and our desires are incompatible. That's almost never true. But it's through that vector of asking questions and being curious that we actually find out, oh, you want something slightly to the left of what I want. And perhaps we can come to some middle ground, or even if we're not supporting each other and working together, we at least recognize implicitly that we're not adversarial towards each other.
Wow.
And that our assumption that we are adversarial towards each other is really the root of our continued disagreement, because we already assume that we know, you know, and we need to really take that time to be inquisitive and to be curious and to find out and to recognize that, you know, you're not my enemy. You know, there is opportunity here for us to learn from each other and grow together from the experience. We may not come out of it being high five, you know, being buddies and hugs all around, but if we're curious and we take the time to ask questions, we often find out that there's room enough for us to each get exactly what we want without infringing upon the other person.
So I just heard you say something I thought was really fascinating. And that's that just because we don't want the exact same things doesn't mean that what we desire is oppositional and adversarial to each other. And I don't think that's really an idea that is often put forward. It's like either we want the same things and then everything is good, or we don't want the same things, in which case we are fighting and battling. And what I hear you saying is, well, it could be a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, but that doesn't mean that you are now mortal enemies, you know, because you don't want the same thing. That is so powerful.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And it actually can be that us not wanting, coming back to polarity, us not wanting the same thing can actually be perfect, because we want the kind of the two faces of the same thing. Actually, I had a conversation with my coach earlier, which was on the topic that we were talking about the last show that we did, and we also was back again chatting about before we started recording about this, you know, women not having an inner masculine, men not having an inner feminine. And he and I were talking about this earlier, and I said, you know what? The longer I've been on this path, the less it seems true to me that I do have this masculine aspect. I just, where is it? Like I look for it, it's not there. I can't feel that. It doesn't seem true. And he's been in men's work for many, many, many years. And he said, and we'd never had that conversation. We'd, I guess, always just assumed, you know, because it's often spoken about that way. We both just assumed, we both agreed that, you know, of course we have a
Right.
And he said, do you know what? Over the last year, I've come to the exact same conclusion.
Wow.
And he gave a few examples, but one of them really hit me. And he said he had went to a tantric kind of workshop, whatever, with his wife. And they were doing some exercise where they were invited into kind of the extreme ends of their polarity. So him as a man, the extreme end of the masculine, her into the feminine. And he said, I felt the most me I believe it was possible to feel. I felt completely me. And from that place, and not to say that that's how we have to be all the time or that's right for anyone, but there was something the way he said that really hit me. And I was like, from that place, of course, you're going to want the same thing. You might want something that gives you both what you want, but it's not going to be the same experience because you're at different ends of a pole.
Exactly. What I desire from Baba Richard and what he desires for me are completely different things. And if he gave me what he wanted from me, and I was giving him what I wanted from him, we would just be miserable. We would be miserable if he's like, you know, babe, come in here and carry this heavy thing, or and I'm
probably truck with me.
You know, and we would just both be so unhappy. It's actually the fact that we don't want the same things that actually makes us a match. Because we meet each other in our just differences. And I think that's really what it is. We meet each other. We meet the God, in each other through our differences. The God in each other, because it is the God that I cannot see in me that I meet in you.
And we need that, like we need air and water. We need that because that's fundamentally what we come into, that celebration when we come into union as men and women. It's like, I need to celebrate that aspect of you that is not like me. You know, I find that incredibly compelling. At the same time, I'm not going to try to imitate that.
Right.
You know, when I want to touch, and I've said this for years, when I want to touch my feminine, I do this. I reach over and touch Namaste, and vice versa. And that's a good thing. And I celebrate that, and I look forward to that. And that really, really adds a wonderful dimension to my entire life, recognizing, you know, her bow to my eye.
Well, I feel like, could we have had a more perfect place to end this? And I have to say, I was saying I have a transcription service that I highlight as guests say amazing things. I think I've highlighted this one more than any other. Oh my goodness, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Just gone into such again, medicinal places. Like, these are conversations I think are so needed in the world right now.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of the conversation. We love it. Thank you.
Honestly, my pleasure. I'm so excited. It's another one where I just can't wait to get this out to listeners' ears. So if listeners, and I'm sure they will, want to find out more about you two and your work, where's the best place for them to go?
InfiniteCouple.com is where we're found, and they can also find us on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is The Infinite Couple. We are The Infinite Couple on Facebook, and also The Infinite Couple on YouTube. So, so basically, if you look up The Infinite Couple in any social media platform, you'll find us.
You will find us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm going to have to ask you on again another time, but I'm really glad we spoke.
Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. Wasn't that amazing? Here are my best bits. In our well-intended desire for fairness, we often end up creating a need to be the same, which means we don't get to benefit from the power of the two ends of the pole and the energy that can be created between the two. I loved what Richard said about how the celebration of differences is a world in which we cultivate excellence, genius, beauty, and artistry. Things that could be said to be some of the best qualities of humans, certainly ones that I value greatly. When we bring the best of ourselves, our true power, and we also join in together with another powerful person, then we become an engine, something far greater than the sum of its parts. If you'd like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 340. And if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or your app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode straight to your device auto-magically as soon as it comes out. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.